So, what if I told you that the way you pet your cat, like the exact thing you do to show them love and affection, is secretly flooding their bloodstream with stress hormones?
Yeah, it's pretty wild to think about.
Right. I mean, you bring this little creature into your home,
Yeah.
you buy the premium grain-free food, you scatter those expensive, plush mice across the living room floor, and you genuinely think you're giving them the greatest life possible.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
there is this massive gap between our human intentions and, well, their actual feline reality.
It is a profound disconnect. And it really happens because we instinctively just map our own psychology onto them.
Yeah.
Most of the things we do that slowly break down a cat's sense of safety, they feel completely harmless to us. We think we're comforting them or teaching them, but their nervous system is actually interpreting our actions as unpredictable threats.
Which is exactly our mission for today's deep dive. We have an incredible source to analyze that breaks down 6 very common yet widely misunderstood mistakes that cat owners make like every single day.
Yep. And we are going to decode the hidden biology and psychology of your cat so that you can actually transform your pet's health and happiness.
Yeah, we are leaving the myths behind and looking at the raw neurological wiring of the animal living in your house. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with a massive breakdown in communication, because it seems like the core issue here is that we constantly expect them to act like tiny humans, or, at the very least, weird little dogs.
Right, exactly. We rely heavily on this canine or human lens, which completely ignores how feline neurology actually developed.
Because dogs were bred for, what, thousands of years to do this?
Yes, thousands of years specifically to read human social cues, to understand our pointing, our vocal tones, and our corrective feedback.
Mm.
Cats basically domesticated themselves by just hanging around grain stores to catch mice.
Right, they just showed up for the buffet.
Exactly. So their brains are simply not wired to interpret our complex social corrections.
So let's apply that to the first major behavioral clash, which is yelling. Picture the scenario. You're in the kitchen, and you catch your cat slowly, deliberately nudging a glass of water toward the edge of the counter.
Oh, we've all been there.
The immediate instinctual human reaction is to shout, "Hey!" or yell their name at a really high volume to get them to stop. Because to a human brain, A leads to B. You do a bad thing, you receive a loud verbal warning, you learn not to do the bad thing again.
Which works beautifully for a toddler or even, a golden retriever.
Yeah.
But the research completely dismantles this approach for felines.
How so?
Well, the researchers looked at behavioral markers of anxiety in households that used verbal punishment versus positive reinforcement. And they found that felines simply do not map cause and effect onto vocal reprimands the way we do.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, when you yell because they knock the glass over, they do not internalize the lesson that pushing the glass is a forbidden action.
So, what is actually happening in their brain? Because clearly they run away when you yell, so they're reacting to something, right?
Right. They are reacting to an environmental threat. Instead of learning a rule about the glass, they're basically just learning that their caregiver is prone to sudden, terrifying explosions of noise.
That is so sad.
It really is. The studies document that cats subjected to regular vocal reprimands exhibit significantly higher baseline levels of cortisol. That's the stress hormone.
Right.
They end up living in this state of chronic hyperarousal. And this leads directly to secondary behavioral issues, like they start hiding under beds, acting aggressively out of nowhere, or avoiding their litter box entirely.
I always think about this like having a completely unhinged roommate.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Like, imagine if you were just exploring your apartment, touching a book on a shelf, and randomly your roommate just screamed at you at the top of their lungs.
You'd be terrified.
Yeah, you wouldn't think, oh, I must have touched the wrong book. You would just think, my roommate is deeply unstable, and I need to avoid making eye contact with them at all costs.
That is the perfect analogy. And the tragedy is that the owner is usually just reacting out of frustration, not malice.
Right, they just want the glass to not break.
Exactly. But the cat cannot decipher the intention behind the volume. All their nervous system registers is the sudden acoustic assault. So over time, yelling doesn't train the cat. It just quietly erodes the foundational bond of trust.
Which brings us to another way we accidentally destroy that trust. And this one happens when we are actively trying to be loving.
Yes, the petting.
We pet them in the completely wrong spots.
Yeah.
We pet cats exactly the way we pet dogs, long, heavy strokes all the way down the back, aggressively scratching the base of the tail or going right in for the belly rub.
And dogs love that broad physical contact. But cats experience something clinically referred to as petting-induced overstimulation.
What does that actually mean for the cat?
Well, to understand this, you have to look at their anatomy.
Mm.
A cat's skin and hair follicles are densely packed with incredibly sensitive mechanoreceptors. So what feels like a gentle, loving stroke to a human hand actually builds up a static charge of neurological noise in a cat. A sensation can shift from feeling pleasant to feeling like painful, overwhelming static electricity in just a matter of seconds.
And there was a major study on this, right? Mapping out the physical zones where cats actually want to be touched. And it turns out we are almost always doing it wrong.
Completely wrong.
Because the researchers found that cats showed the lowest stress responses, meaning their heart rate stayed calm, and they were genuinely enjoying it when they were touched almost exclusively around the facial glands.
Yes, exactly. We're talking the cheeks, the base of the ears, and right under the chin.
Just the face.
Just the face. Those specific areas are where cats naturally groom each other when they want to show affection, and it's where their scent glands are concentrated.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the researchers noted that the moment the physical contact moved down the spine toward the base of the tail or onto the stomach, the physiological data just flipped.
Like an immediate change.
Immediate. Stress hormones spiked. The nervous system became instantly overwhelmed by the sensory input.
Okay, I have to ask. Wait, so when my cat rolls over and shows me their belly, is it a trap?
The trap.
Yeah, are they setting me up to fail? Because I'll walk into the living room, they flop over on the rug, expose their stomach, and the second I reach down to rub it, they lock onto my arm with all four paws and bite me.
It feels incredibly deceptive, I know. But you have to interpret that action through their language, not ours.
Okay, so what are they saying?
When a cat exposes its belly to you, it is not asking for a massage. It's actually offering you a profound compliment,
Really? By showing the teeth and claws?
where the bite comes later. But initially, a cat's stomach protects all of its vital organs. So by rolling over and exposing it, they're basically communicating, I feel so entirely safe in your territory that I do not need to physically protect my most vulnerable anatomy right now.
Oh, wow.
It is a passive declaration of ultimate trust.
Oh, man. So they are essentially saying, I trust you. And we are responding by diving hands first into their most vulnerable spot, which completely violates that trust.
Exactly that. By touching the belly, you are suddenly triggering their hardwired defensive reflexes. You force their brain to switch from safe relaxation to active threat.
That makes me feel so guilty.
It's just a miscommunication. And it usually isn't a random switch either.
Huh.
If you watch closely, their early warning system will go off before the bite.
Like what?
The tail will start flicking sharply, or the skin on their back might twitch, or their ears will flatten back against their head. That is them politely screaming that their sensory limits have been breached.
Right. We treat them like cute little decorative roommates, but our source material highlights that we completely ignore their deep, hardwired, wild instincts.
The modern indoor cat is living a daily paradox. Evolutionarily speaking, they are simultaneously fierce, hardwired apex predators and incredibly vulnerable, small-bodied prey.
Both at the same time?
Both. And our modern, climate-controlled homes often completely stifle both ends of that biological spectrum.
Let's tackle the predator side first, because we just assume that because they live inside a safe apartment, they don't need to hunt.
Right. They have a bowl full of premium kibble, so the drive must be gone.
Yeah, but staring at a moth vibrating on the ceiling from across the room doesn't exactly satisfy millions of years of evolutionary programming.
Not in the slightest. A feline's entire brain chemistry and neurological reward system are built around a very specific, deeply ingrained predatory sequence.
And that sequence is stalk, chase, pounce, catch, kill, and eat.
Yes. Their brains actually require the completion of that circuit to release serotonin and dopamine. So when an indoor cat goes days, weeks, or even months without activating that full sequence, their internal machinery essentially begins to malfunction.
And the sources dive into studies looking directly at what happens when that predatory sequence is permanently put on pause. And the results are actually heartbreaking.
They really are.
Because we often look at an indoor cat who just sleeps on the sofa for 16 hours a day, and we brag to our friends about what a great, low-maintenance, chill pet we have. We think they're just relaxed.
But the research paints a much darker picture of that quote-unquote chill behavior. They found that cats lacking regular, structured predatory play exhibited massive spikes in negative health outcomes.
Like what kind of outcomes?
We're talking about obesity, unprovoked aggression toward other pets, and compulsive disorders, like psychogenic alopecia, where they literally groom themselves bald out of pure anxiety.
Oh my God. And most tragically, deep depression-like symptoms. So that cat sleeping 16 hours a day isn't necessarily lazy or relaxed. They are mentally starving.
Precisely.
They have essentially given up, falling into a state of learned helplessness because their environment is completely devoid of purpose.
The apathy is profound, but, the intervention is actually remarkably simple.
You don't need to release live mice into your kitchen.
No, please don't do that. You just need to dedicate 10 to 15 minutes a day to interactive play with a wand toy,
Yeah.
something that mimics the erratic, unpredictable stop-and-start movement of a real bird or rodent.
So you let them hide behind a chair and stalk it, let them sprint across the room after it, and crucially, and this is the part people always mess up, you have to let them actually catch it and bite down on the toy.
Yes, the bite is essential.
They have to sink their teeth in so their brain registers the kill, which completes that psychological loop and triggers the rush of satisfying brain chemistry.
What's fascinating here is how that predator drive is intrinsically linked to the other side of their evolutionary coin, which is their vulnerability as prey.
Okay, right.
And nowhere in the modern home does this cause more sheer, unadulterated panic than with the litter box.
I am so glad we are talking about this because I will fully admit I used to believe the spite myth.
Oh, everyone does.
Whenever I heard about a cat peeing on a living room rug, or worse, right in the middle of their owner's bed, I completely assumed it was behavioral. It feels like a direct passive-aggressive statement.
It really does.
You think, oh, they are mad I worked late, so they are ruining my favorite rug out of revenge.
But that is just the human ego projecting complex emotional vindictiveness onto an animal that is actually just terrified. To understand little box avoidance, you really have to think about where humans usually place them.
Yeah, we shove them into the darkest basement corner, tuck them behind a vibrating washing machine, or hide them inside a tiny bathroom closet. And usually we buy those enclosed boxes with the hoods on them. We hide the box because we don't want to look at it, and we definitely don't want to smell it, which aesthetically makes total sense for a human.
But tactically, you have just placed their bathroom in the most terrifying, disadvantageous location imaginable.
Because they're prey.
Exactly. Because a cat is small prey for larger predators, the physical act of eliminating is one of the most vulnerable positions they can possibly be in. In the wild, when a cat uses the bathroom, they require a clear 360-degree line of sight to scan for approaching threats.
Wow.
And they absolutely must have multiple unobstructed escape routes.
So when we push a plastic box into a tight closet, put a hood over it, and leave only one tiny flap for an exit, we are basically forcing them to step into an ambush trap every single time they need to relieve themselves.
That's exactly what it is,
Yeah.
an ambush trap. And the research links that exact lack of accessibility to severe elimination problems. The data proves it is almost always a location and safety problem, not a spite problem.
That makes so much sense.
If a cat feels cornered in a basement, their survival instinct overrides their litter training. They choose the living room rug or the bed. Because those locations are elevated, they smell comforting, and they offer multiple directions to run if a predator appears. They're just prioritizing their own survival.
So they aren't acting out. They are desperately trying to feel safe in an environment that we accidentally made hostile.
Exactly.
And the behavioral experts overwhelmingly recommend the M+1 rule to fix this, right?
Yes, the M+1 rule.
Which is you should have one litter box for every cat you own plus one extra. But you can't just line 3 boxes up next to each other in the laundry room.
No, that completely defeats the purpose. They need to be spread out in different socially significant, well-lit areas of the home.
To give them options.
Exactly, tactical options. If a loud noise is happening near the kitchen box, they have a safe alternative in the guest room. It also dramatically diffuses territorial tension if you have multiple cats who might be, silently guarding resources.
It is wild how much of their daily anxiety is driven by a tactical environment we don't even realize we are creating.
It really is.
But this mismatch between their biology and our modern lifestyle doesn't just dictate their mental health. Their geographical ancestry is secretly dictating their physical health, too.
Yes.
Specifically when we look at the convenience of how we feed them.
The dietary mismatch is perhaps the most dangerous silent threat we subject them to.
Yeah.
And to understand this, we really have to look back at their evolutionary origins. Domestic cats are descendants of a wild cat that evolved in the extremely arid desert environments of the Middle East and Africa.
And because they evolved in a blistering desert environment, I'm assuming they didn't exactly have access to fresh flowing rivers and lakes.
No, they did not.
So their bodies had to figure out a way to get hydration entirely from what they were eating. A mouse or a small bird is roughly, 70 to 80% water.
Right.
So they basically evolved to just drink their food.
That is precisely the biological workaround. Because of this evolutionary adaptation, a cat's natural physiological thirst drive is incredibly blunt. They are simply not hardwired to feel thirsty, seek out standing bodies of water, and lap up huge volumes of liquid the way a dog does.
That's crazy.
Their brain just assumes the water will arrive packaged inside the prey.
Which brings us to the modern convenience of dry kibble. The sources point out that commercial dry cat food contains only about 10% moisture.
Barely anything.
So if an owner is feeding their cat a 100% dry food diet, that cat is never getting the hydration they naturally expect from their meals. And because their internal thirst mechanism is basically broken by design, they aren't instinctively walking over to the water bowl to make up that massive deficit.
No, they aren't. They end up living in a perpetual state of chronic, low-level dehydration. And there are crucial studies on this exact crisis. They measured total water intake and found that cats maintained strictly on dry kibble diets had significantly lower total daily hydration compared to cats fed wet food.
Even if they had water bowls out.
That's the frightening part. This held true even when fresh, clean water was freely available in multiple bowls around the house for the kibble-fed cats. They just didn't drink enough to compensate.
I always try to imagine what that feels like. It would be like a human trying to survive by eating nothing but dry saltine crackers for every meal, every single day, and only taking 2 tiny sips of coffee to wash it down.
You'd feel awful.
Eventually, your organs are going to start failing.
And the biological toll on cats is devastating. Feline kidneys are incredibly efficient. They evolved to super-concentrate urine to conserve water in the desert. But when you force those kidneys to run without adequate moisture year after year, it places an immense compounding strain on them.
Wow.
This chronic dietary mismatch is a massive leading contributor to feline chronic kidney disease, which is, tragically, the #1 cause of death in older cats.
That is a terrifying reality. But it is also incredibly empowering because the fix doesn't require a veterinary degree.
No, not at all.
You don't have to bankrupt yourself buying exclusively artisanal raw food, and you don't even have to throw all your kibble in the trash. The sources make it clear. Simply mixing in a portion of wet food a few times a week, or even just adding warm water or bone broth to their dry kibble makes a monumental difference.
It really does.
You are literally giving their kidneys a fighting chance just by acknowledging where they came from.
It's a small, mechanical adjustment to our routine that fundamentally respects their biology.
Yeah.
But, respecting their biology also means we have to confront the emotional myths we've constructed about them. Like the idea that we can just feed them and ignore them.
Yes, the myth of the fiercely independent, aloof cat, it is probably the biggest, most pervasive lie in pet culture.
Oh, without a doubt.
We have this collective societal assumption that cats just simply do not care if we are around. That you can leave a cat alone in an apartment for 12, 14, or 16 hours a day, and they are perfectly fine, totally self-sufficient, just enjoying the silence.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can see exactly why this myth exists. It goes right back to that stoic, predatory nature we discussed earlier. In the wild, if a small, solitary predator shows any outward signs of distress, anxiety, or physical weakness, they become an immediate target for a larger predator.
So they have to hide it.
Exactly. They evolve to mask their emotional and physical pain flawlessly. We look at a quiet, unmoving cat and project human emotions onto them, assuming they're content or bored, when in reality they might be deeply distressed.
And science has finally caught up to prove that they actually do form deep attachments to us. There was a landmark study that completely shattered the myth of the unfeeling feline. The researchers utilized something called the secure base test,
Right.
which for context is the exact same psychological methodology used to evaluate attachment in human toddlers.
It's fascinating.
You imagine putting a toddler in a strange, unfamiliar room with toys, taking their mother away for 2 minutes, and then measuring how they react when the mother returns. They did the exact same thing with cats and their owners.
And the behavioral coding from that experiment was undeniable. When the owners returned to the unfamiliar room, the cats demonstrated clear, measurable evidence of forming genuine, deep attachment bonds.
That's so sweet.
The majority of felines exhibited secure attachment, meaning their stress vocalizations dropped, and they confidently explored the room as long as their owner was present. They rely on us for emotional regulation. They're completely dependent on the quality and consistency of their relationship with their caregiver.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because their evolutionary survival depends on masking distress, they don't broadcast their separation anxiety the way a dog does.
No, they don't.
When a dog panics that you left, they will bark for 6 hours straight, chew a hole through your drywall, or completely destroy your favorite pair of shoes. A cat doesn't do that.
They suffer their prolonged isolation in almost complete silence. When you leave a cat completely alone for massive stretches of time without any environmental stimulation, they turn that anxiety inward.
Like internalized stress.
Yeah, exactly. You might see subtle appetite changes, or they might start that obsessive over-grooming, or they might suddenly develop one of those litter box avoidance problems we discussed earlier.
And because they are quiet about it, we just walk through the door after a 10-hour shift, see them sitting on the couch in the exact same spot, and assume everything is totally fine.
Right.
But the reality is, they felt your absence intimately. So what is the actionable takeaway here for someone who works long hours? You obviously don't need to quit your job and be home 24 hours a day to be a good owner.
No, of course not. But you do need to actively manage their environment while you are gone and actively manage your connection when you return.
What does that look like?
Before you leave for the day, set up passive enrichment. Open the blinds and create comfortable window perches so they have cat TV to watch birds and insects.
Right.
Rotate their puzzle toys so they have novel challenges that engage their brains.
Give them something to do.
Exactly. And most importantly, when you walk through the front door at the end of the day, do not just walk past them to check your mail or look at your phone. Sit down. Be entirely present in their world. Give them 5 uninterrupted minutes of genuine, focused connection.
Because to you, they are just a part of your busy day, but to them, sitting in that apartment, you are their entire world.
So true.
Okay. So what does this all mean? We've covered a tremendous amount of ground today. If we pull all these scientific and behavioral threads together, the major takeaway is that cats are absolutely not just weird, low-maintenance dogs.
Definitely not.
They are incredibly complex, highly sensitive, desert-dwelling predators who form profound, real emotional bonds with the humans in their lives. And if we just tweak our perspective, if we stop yelling and start managing their environment, if we learn where to pet them, how to properly activate their predator drive, where to safely put their bathroom, and how to hydrate them, we can drastically extend their physical lives and improve their daily happiness.
It's transformative.
It's entirely about learning to speak their language instead of forcing them to learn ours.
It really requires a profound level of empathy for a different species. And this raises an important question, one that extends far beyond just how we treat our pets.
Oh.
If our cats have been quietly, stoically adapting to our completely alien human habits for all these years, suffering in silence because we misread their biological cues.
Wow. Yeah.
What other bad behaviors in the animals we keep, or honestly, even in the people around us, are actually just desperate, misunderstood attempts to communicate their most basic needs to someone who simply hasn't learned their language yet?
That is a thought that will definitely stay with you the next time you look at that messy, confusing landscape of someone else's behavior. We always want things to be simple, to just point at a problem and fix it with a loud warning, but sometimes the real problem is just a massive breakdown in translation. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.